Hello, everyone. My name is Jarrod Gingras. I'm the Managing Director and one of the analysts here at the Real Story Group, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our latest in our webinar series. Today's topic is on the right way to select technology for your new omnichannel stack. Now, I know this is a topic that's at the top of mind for most of you on this call, and because we were talking with our subscribers about this subject on a daily basis, and it's one that's been prevalent for quite some time now, but it's growing in importance as people's omnichannel ambitions grow as well. And so there's some parallels there. And so the criticality of selecting technology the right way becomes more and more important for organizations. And I think we're seeing that in the interest we have on today's webinar and in general the conversations that we're having, like I mentioned. Just some housekeeping before we get started. We're going to break this into three big chunks. So we'll start with some context and some disclaimers from me, so you know where I'm coming from. We'll talk about the goal for most of you on the call today, as I imagine it, and then we'll talk about the right way to select technology for your new omnichannel stack. So let's jump into it with some context and disclaimers. So I know there's a lot of familiar names on the call today, but there's also a bunch of new ones. So I just want to give you the quick overview on Real Story Group so you know where we're coming from here. Real Story Group, we're an industry analyst firm that helps clients make the right technology decisions for what it is you're trying to do. And we do that through a variety of different ways. The first is through pure vendor selection advisory, where we help people pick the right technology for their challenges. And we do that through the research that we're publishing on an ongoing basis and the advisory that we give our subscribers in helping them to go through a process that we'll talk a little bit more about today. Number two, we help our subscribers in an omnichannel stack advisory capacity. And that's one where we're not looking at helping you pick a single technology necessarily, but we're helping you look at your entire technology stack and look at how all the pieces fit together so that we can help you get to providing those holistic experiences that you're looking to provide. And so that's when we take kind of a big picture view, a more strategic view, and we're doing this more and more with our clients as well. And then the third way is our council level membership. And this is something relatively new. We started this last year where we got together some of our subscribers, particularly those who are responsible for owning either the entire stack within their enterprise, or at least responsible for making critical decisions about what belongs in their enterprise's stack. And we've gotten this group of people together, and we're meeting on a regular basis now to share ideas in a really confidential environment where there's not going to be any vendor sales pitches there, but it's just going to be a free exchange of ideas. And we're also using that council to inform our advisory strategy. So if you think that you'd like to apply to be a member on that council, by all means, give me a shout after this webinar. But rest assured, even if you're not a member of the council, we plan on taking the lessons learned as part of that council and really having that drive our research agenda that we then pass along to our other subscribers as well. So we think this is a good blend of ways that people can interact with us on an ongoing basis. As always, we wanted to give our perspective here when we're talking about different software vendors in the marketplace. I think it's really important to know our position in this space is really one that's unique. We, unlike any other analyst firm that we're aware of, and we've been around doing this for close to 20 years now, we do not work for any software vendors in any way. Okay, we don't speak at their vendor events. We don't accept meals from them or write white papers for them. What this enables us to do is really retain a level of independence that is, like I said, unique in the analyst space. And we think that independence allows what we like to call the real story to shine through. So we're able to truly sit on the buyer side of the table, and because we're not beholden to the vendors that we're covering. And I hope you appreciate that. Quite frankly, it's something we're very proud of. Here's our omnichannel stack vendor map that we've kind of become known for. We've been doing this map or some version of it for, I think, close to 10 years now. We recently published something on LinkedIn that shows the history of this map as it's evolved over the years, and it's been quite a journey. But as buyers today, you have options, and that's what this map really aims to show. There's options from kind of the biggest names in software at the hubs of the map, and there's lots of best of breed options that go out into the periphery. So this is the world that we live in, and we really try to watch all of these vendors and more so that we can pass along to you what they're good at and what they're not so good at, where they're a good fit and where they're not such a good fit. As I mentioned, in my role here at the Real Story Group, I'm the managing director and also one of the analysts. But as part of our work here at the Real Story Group, we do a lot of consulting, and we've helped a lot of organizations pick technology. And so a few years back, my colleague Tony and I wrote this book called The Right Way to Select Technology, where we tried to document the lessons that we've learned over the years. And so if anyone's interested in that, you can get a hard copy at rosenfeldmedia.com, or if you contact us, we can see if we can get you an e-copy. A lot of lessons learned that we're going to be talking about today come from the book, and so there's lots more detail in there if you're interested. All right, let's get into the meat of this. And first of all, let's talk about the goal. And when I say the goal, I'm really talking about the goal of every marketer, to put it simply, but every person within an enterprise. Every enterprise at a high level is trying to create an ideal customer experience, right? And when you boil down what that means for most enterprises, in most cases, if not all cases, we're able to boil that down to, I want to get the right content and the right message to the right person in the right context at the right time. And then in a perfect world, I'm able to measure the effectiveness of doing that, right? Everyone wants to create this consistent experience with every single touch point that a person has with your brand, with your message, with your content. And in order to do that, we need to provide our enterprise with a set of tools so that the people creating these experiences can do so in a meaningful way. However, while that's the goal, what's happened is over time, we've developed a number of engagement silos where, that content, data, rules, planning, analytics that we all strive to achieve, we've put those things, or at least storing those things and working on those things in these silos. Not surprisingly, it's kind of grown up with these silos kind of align with channels as they've developed throughout time. I pick on the web a lot because many of us in the digital space today grew up in the web world, but there's so much content and data and rules and analytics that are stored in our web content management systems today that in many organizations that we talk to are stuck because they say that it's too limiting for them to be all in a web content management system. And some of that stuff should be there, but a lot of that stuff needs to come out so that they can achieve true multi-channel, or in a perfect world, an omni-channel experiences. So lots of silos that are very much tied to engagement channels. And so let's think about this from a more of a perfect world, blue sky scenario. So if we could do this all again, so that we can really provide that consistent experience across touch points, across channels, what would we want our stacks to look like? Well, we probably want to take those rules, those content, those analytics, that data, and push it lower in our stack. Get it out of those channel-specific systems and really provide those things as foundational services to the enterprise, regardless of what channel that people are interacting with us in. And so we want consistent messaging, ideally. We want people to feel like the enterprise knows me. We want it to be a coherent interaction. We want there to be consistency across stories. And we want our options to be really relevant based on data and information that we know. So let's see how that plays out. You know, I know there's a bunch of folks on the phone who come from different backgrounds. So we have some business folks, we have some IT folks. I think the previous slide might speak more to business folks, but for the IT folks on the phone, usually this plays out in a true technical stack. And you know, the enterprise architects on the line today will resonate with this concept of stack, where if you kind of go up from the horizontal layers here, if you will, you know, you see the enterprise foundation platforms feeding your content and engagement management platforms through a series of interaction delivery environments and ultimately to your engagement channels. Now, this is how it's going to manifest itself, undoubtedly. However, one of the challenges we have today is we tend to think about buying software and buying tools for my enterprise to create experiences still in a siloed mentality. Part of that is the way we're organized as enterprises. You know, I imagine many of you on the phone can recognize the pattern here, where we see things like web teams picking software for you know, web interactions. You might have an email marketing team who goes out looking for marketing automation type software. You might even have a social team who's just looking at social publishing. You might have a team that's entirely devoted to print. You might have a call center team that just answers the phones. You might have a different team that answers chat questions and whatnot. So the way we're organized is perpetuating this silo problem. And in order to get out of that, we need to think differently. And that's why I'm going to challenge you all today, is to think differently. And we take a bold statement here and call it the right way. And maybe that's a little ambitious, but I've seen this work, and I think once you understand what I'm going to say, you're all going to agree with me and say it's the right way as well. At least I hope. So the way we like to think about the right way of selecting technology in today's day and age, and especially as we start to think about it to power a true omni-channel world, we need to put the end consumer at the center of our solutioning, right? We can't just be thinking about stacks for stack's sake. We have to be thinking about the users. And so the best way we've been able to do this, or the way we've seen it work best, to truly work best in enterprise situations, is to take a design thinking approach to solve technology selection. So I'm sure many of you have heard of design thinking. This isn't a new concept. It's been around for years and years and years, but Stanford has done the most work on this, and they define it as a process and a way of thinking about tough to solve problems. They go further to say it's a human-centered approach to innovation that draws from the designer's toolkit to integrate the needs of people, the possibilities of technology, and the requirements for business success. And you know, prior to my time as a technology analyst, I worked as a user experience advocate in designing web and mobile experiences for large companies. And you know, when I heard this really spoke to me. You know, if we could take that designer's toolkit and apply it to this broken way of selecting technology, I think we're really onto something there. And so that's what we did when we were working with our clients. Is we went to this designer's toolkit, we went to this design way of thinking, where we start to say, okay, how can we apply some empathy, some definition, some ideation, some prototyping and testing to help our clients pick the right technology for what they're trying to do. Ultimately, selecting technology is a winnowing down process. You know, as you saw from the subway map, the vendor map that we showed at the outset here, you know, as buyers, you have a ton of options, and they're all not good fits for what you're trying to do, but some of them are, and you need to really winnow down from a lot of options to the right options and test it every step of the way. So let's go through each of these and really break down what I mean by these. So the first is the empathy phase. Here is where I see a lot of organizations get in trouble when they go about technology selection. They first start by going out and canvassing their organization, talking to lots of different stakeholders with the intent of developing a really long laundry list of requirements that a new system will need. And that's all well and good. That's not necessarily a wasted effort, but those requirements are not the best way of communicating what you truly need to a vendor partner, nor yourselves. And here I'm going to suggest a way of creating use case stories that really paint a picture of what it is you're trying to do in a way that is describing a future way of working without prescribing a solution. I think there's a little bit of art and science to that, but I think so much time is wasted by trying to develop these laundry lists of, of requirements that end up in these spreadsheets that become the bulk of RFPs that you throw over to vendors, and all you get back is a bunch of yeses to, yes, we can do all these things. And it's not necessarily that the vendors are lying to you or that they can do all these things, because they probably have checked the box for some client of theirs in the past. But what you're not seeing is how they're able to solve your challenges. And especially when we start to talk about these complicated environments of technologies integrating with each other, it's not enough to say, hey, can my web content management system interact with my DAM system? Can it interact with my PIM system? Can it interact with my marketing automation system? Just checking the box saying that these systems can integrate is not enough. You need to see how these things integrate. What metadata gets passed along, what content gets passed from system to system. How does that data and content flow from system to system impact the user experience? Are my people going to have to jump back and forth from screen to screen? Do I have to have multiple windows open? Is it a jarring experience, or does it feel seamless? Is it making my employees and my staff lives easier, or am I creating problems? And so I think going down the peer requirement route often leads to some surprises in the end, and that's what we want to avoid. So instead, I suggest that you get into these, or you create these narrative scenarios that definitely capture the differentiating requirements of your organization, but not every requirement of your organization. We want to describe real actors, real personas, real people that would be working in these systems and with your content and data. I want you to describe real environments that they're working in. I want you to describe real processes and real content types and real data types, and as much as you can. But again, I just want to reiterate, you want to describe a future way of working without prescribing a solution. Okay, so once we have our scenarios developed, not only are you ready to communicate these to potential vendor partners, you're also aligning yourselves with your own internal colleagues about where we're headed. What are we trying to do here? It's so easy when you go down that spreadsheet route for people within your organization, certain stakeholders, to say, I only care about these 10 requirements, and here, you add these to the spreadsheet, and that's all I care about. But and what happens there is they don't see the big picture. They don't see the big value that you're getting across the organization. They only see their little world. But as you start to flesh out these use case scenarios, we found that it's a much better way of building consensus and building a common direction that everyone's marching in, right? And I think that's such a huge benefit to this process right there. All right, so we have our scenarios. Now we need to define where we're gonna push these scenarios out to, so that we can find the best possible partners. And when we talk about the definition phase, we're really talking about finding the right short list of vendors as potential partners. Now, when you look at the stack that we talked about earlier, and everyone wants to create these omnichannel platforms that are truly foundational to their enterprises, it's really easy to say, well, isn't there just a single vendor out there that can be my MarTech stack? Kind of a one-size-fits-all approach to solving this problem. And I don't blame you for asking that question, because there's a lot of vendors out there who are saying that they should be your omnichannel platform, and that's just not true. There's not a single vendor who's going to do all of those boxes that we showed in the beginning. There's not a single vendor who can be that for your organization. Now, certain vendors can do pieces of that. Some can do multiple pieces of that, but there's not one who's going to give you everything. Likewise, when you start to find out different solutions, you start to look at analyst reports that might be out there, maybe these one-size-fits-all single snapshot views of the marketplace that people tend to glom onto. You'll find yourself starting to look at those, and it's really easy to start to look at the upper right quadrants of these kind of single snapshot views and say, well, these must be the best vendors in the marketplace. And what we found over the years is that's just not necessarily true. You know, there's lots of good vendors who are good at different things, and I think you need to keep your eyes open and be wary of the single snapshot views of the marketplace, and instead find a way to figure out which vendors that are fundamentally built for the challenges that you're trying to solve. The way that we do that here at Real Story Group, we built this tool called the Real Quadrant Shortlist Generator, and this is our answer to the quadrant, but the difference between our quadrant and others is that it's not a single snapshot view of a marketplace. It's a custom view of the marketplace that's custom to what you tell us are most important to you. So you tell us which scenarios are most important. We go through a set of other criteria questions, and we ask you to weight these scenarios and some other factors as to what is most important to your situation. And then we align those priorities to our ratings, and we give you a quadrant that is truly custom to what you tell us is most important. And we think that's a much better way of getting to the right shortlist. Next, we come to the ideation phase. So here we want to conduct realistic vendor demos where you're not wasting your time or their time. We want to make the most of the time that you have with vendors in a demo situation. If anyone's been part of vendors demos or a vendor demo week for that matter, you know it can be tough. It's a long week. It's a lot of time on the vendor's part. It's a lot of time on your part, and if you start adding up the salaries of the people in the room and the amount of time that you're in this room watching these demos, they're really expensive. So you want to make them as real and productive as possible. So how do we do that? Well, the first thing we want you to do is when you have vendors in to demo for you, you don't want them to just come in and demo the same canned demonstrations that they give everyone else, because those always look good. We want you to force them to demo your use cases. So go back to those scenarios that we wrote where we described and didn't prescribe a solution. Here's the chance for the vendor to say, okay, I hear what you've described. Here's how our solution can best meet your needs. And you do that in a way that really allows you to compare apples to apples to apples in the course of a vendor week. It's a much more productive way of going about this process, and it's such a learning experience for everyone involved. They learn about you, you learn about them, and in many cases, your team is learning from each other. We've sat in a bunch of these situations for our clients, and oftentimes we're kind of the truth teller in some of these situations, but this is your chance to ask some tough questions, especially around the pricing, because you're not asking them to give the same demo that they give to everyone else. They need to show you exactly what it would take to get their solutions to meet your unique needs. And sometimes that takes multiple solutions and multiple integrations, and sometimes that requires more customization and more configuration. And those are the things that we want to suss out during this process so that we truly know what we're getting into. Once we complete the demo week, we get to the prototype stage. Now here is where we want to do some proof of concepts, ideally competitive proof of concepts with your finalist vendors. Now, in a perfect world, I'm going to suggest you take your 2 finalists and you ask them to mimic a real implementation project as much as possible. You know, you're going to have to scope this down to a reasonable amount, but you're going to spend half of that time allowing the vendor to build this out for you. And then you're going to spend the next half of having your team actually get their hands on this technology and working with it and trying it out with some real content and getting your real people to actually work with the technology. This is a chance to prove some things out, but also it's a really, really solid chance for you to understand what it's like to work with not only the technology, but the vendors themselves. So again, I can't stress this enough. The key here is to make it as real as you possibly can. So your cooks, your ingredients, your kitchen, if possible, mimic a real project as much as possible. Have the vendor team lead you through it just like they would in an implementation. If in the real world you're going to be using a third party, this might be a chance to get the third party implementer involved in the proof of concept so that you're able to test that relationship as well. And I always get pushback here because this is the most controversial step in the process because it can be really resource intensive, both from the vendor side and your side. But I can honestly say some of the most successful technology selections that we've ever seen are the ones that paid the most attention to this last step, because this is where you learn so many really important lessons before it's too late. And so what I've described here today is a winnowing down process, yes, but one that's rooted in testing with real life scenarios at every step of the way. So the key here is that I want you to not try to design a perfect system from the outset. I want you to sketch some lighter, maybe imperfect requirements at the outset, and then as you go down your refining process, you're understanding what you really need as a vendor understands what you are looking for as well. So hopefully you're coming together so that when it's time to make the decision at the end of the day, everyone is aligned. I mentioned scenarios being so important here, but really when you're looking at evaluating the fit for your organization, you're looking at, sure, scenario fit, but also technology fit. You're looking at the value fit. You can never divorce the cost from this situation, but don't discount looking at the partner fit. And you'll learn a lot going through this process with a vendor and how they treat you and how their people work with your people, and how much they want to work with you versus are they just going through the motions. And I don't think any of that should be discounted. This is all important lessons that you should be paying attention to throughout the way on all four of these fronts. So when we talk about design thinking, the Nielsen Norman Group, when talking about design thinking for user experience, they talk about there's three significant components of common ground in teams. Number one, a shared vocabulary. Number two, tangible artifacts. And number three, a trust-based team culture. And I think if you take what I talked about today and apply it to your tech selection, that's exactly what you're going to be getting. A shared vocabulary in those use case scenarios where everyone's moving in the right direction. Tangible artifacts in those custom demos and custom proof of concepts, and a trust-based team culture because you had lots of stakeholders involved and everyone understanding how this is going to help the organization as a whole, not just a sliver of that organization. I'll wrap up today with another quote from the Nielsen Group, and this is from Jacob Nielsen. He says, "A wonderful interface solving the wrong problem will fail." We've taken that and adapted it to say, "Wonderful technology solving the wrong problem will fail," and that's what you need to be aware of when you're crafting the pieces of your technology stack today. Just because you hear it's good from your peers or vendors or salespeople, don't take their word for it. Prove it out yourself, test it yourself, put them through the ringer so that you're going to be reducing your risk at every stage of the game and getting closer and closer to a decision that your team is confident and comfortable with, and that will lead to much more productive technology decisions and technology stacks, and ultimately it'll manifest itself in better experiences for your customers, for your constituents at every single touch point that they have with your brand, with your content, with your products, with your services. So with that, I think we're out of time. Thank you all so much for being here today. As always, we'll get copies of the slides to all registrants, and you'll get the audio to any subscribers on the line. We'll get you the full audio. If there's anyone new to Real Story Group, if you want to get a look into what the research looks like, you can download a sample or contact us. We'll give you a tour of the subscriber experience, see what's behind the firewall. We'll be happy to do that at any time. And if anyone wants a copy of the book, let us know, and feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn. Always happy to continue the conversation there, or via email or Twitter or wherever you're most comfortable. Thank you all so much for your time. I hope to see you all down the road. Thank you for joining us today, and look forward to future webinars in our series in the next upcoming weeks. Have a great day, everyone.